I am Carson Lane, 32 years old, and tonight I just bought the bank that owns my parents' house, and they have absolutely no idea. Before I tell you about the moment I walked into that party and watched their world crumble, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The gravel crunched satisfyingly under the tires of my Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a sound I wasn't used to hearing in this driveway. The last time I was here, 14 years ago, I was dragging a beat-up duffel bag across the cracked pavement in the rain, trying not to make a sound. Tonight, I wanted everyone to hear me arrive. I killed the engine. The silence inside the cabin was absolute. A heavy, expensive silence that smelled of hand-stitched leather and old money. Through the tinted glass, I looked up at the house. It was a sprawling colonial estate in the best part of Kansas City. The kind of house that screams, "We made it." But I knew the truth. I knew the foundation was cracked. I knew the roof leaked when the storms got too heavy. And I knew that every brick, every shingle, every manicured rosebush in that garden was paid for with stolen talent. My talent. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at me wasn't the scared, skinny kid who used to hide in the basement. I was wearing a bespoke tuxedo, cut from midnight blue velvet. My hair was styled, my beard trimmed. I looked like a stranger. I looked like Vaughn, the name the world knew me by, even if they didn't know the face. I took a deep breath, inhaling the conditioned air one last time before opening the door. The humidity of the Kansas summer hit me instantly, carrying the scent of charcoal grills and expensive perfume. A valet, a kid no older than 19, scrambled over. His eyes went wide when he saw the spirit of ecstasy on the hood of the car. He hesitated, looking at the keys I held out like they were made of plutonium. "Handle it gently," I said, my voice low. "It's heavier than it looks." He nodded, too stunned to speak. I walked toward the front door. I could hear the music drifting out. A string quartet playing something generic and safe. Fit perfectly. My mother, Judith, hated surprises. She hated anything she couldn't control. The front door was open. I stepped into the foyer. It was crowded. There were people everywhere, local politicians, wealthy neighbors, a few B-list celebrities my brother Travis had probably bribed to be here. They were all holding champagne flutes, their laughter sharp and brittle like breaking glass. I stood there for a moment, unannounced. I wanted to take it in, and then I saw them. My parents were standing near the grand staircase. My father, Harold, looked smaller than I remembered. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but didn't fit him right, hanging loose around the shoulders. He was nodding at something a neighbor was saying. His eyes glazed over. He was always good at that, checking out, disappearing while standing right in front of you. And Mom, Judith, she looked exactly the same, just with more jewelry and tighter skin around the eyes. She was holding court, wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the chandelier. She looked triumphant. And there, right beside her, was the golden child, Travis. My brother was leaning against the banister, holding a glass of scotch. He was 35 now, but he still had that boyish charm that had fooled everyone for decades. But I could see the cracks. I saw the way his hand shook slightly when he brought the glass to his lips. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead, despite the aggressive air conditioning. He looked like a man walking a tightrope over a pit of spikes. He was the guest of honor. It was Mom's 60th birthday, but tonight was really about him. It was always about him. Tonight was the night he was supposed to premiere his masterpiece, the symphony that would save his failing career. I adjusted my cufflinks. It was time. I walked further into the room. A few heads turned. People whispered. They didn't recognize me, but they recognized the money. They recognized the way I walked, like I owned the floorboards beneath my feet. Mom looked up. Her smile froze. It didn't drop. It just calcified. Her eyes narrowed, scanning me from my polished shoes to my face. For a second, I saw confusion. Then, recognition. Then, pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Carson," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter near us. Dad looked up, blinking. "Carson." "Hello, Mother." "Hello, Father." I said. My voice was steady. Travis choked on his drink. He coughed, his face turning red. What are you doing here? I received an invitation, I said, pulling the heavy card stock from my inner pocket. Although, I suspect it was sent to my old address to ensure I wouldn't actually get it in time. Fortunately, mail forwarding is a wonderful thing. Mom stepped forward, blocking me from the rest of the party. Look at you, she hissed, her voice dropping to a whisper. You rent a suit and crash my party? We have important people here, Carson. Senators. Investors. Travis is about to perform. Do not make a scene. I'm not here to make a scene, I smiled. I'm just here to listen. I hear Travis has written a new symphony. The Spring Rebirth. Isn't it? Travis went pale. Even under the warm lights, he looked like a ghost. You know about it? Travis stammered. I know a lot of things, brother, I said. Mom let out a short, derisive laugh. She turned back to the room, raising her voice so the nearby guests could hear. She needed to control the narrative immediately. She raised her glass. Everyone, please. The room quieted down. The string quartet stopped playing. All eyes turned to Judith. I am so touched you all could make it, she began, her voice dripping with fake honey. Tonight is a celebration of family. And speaking of family, she gestured vaguely in my direction, but her eyes were cold. It's funny. Raising children is a gamble. Some children make you proud. They carry the torch. They share their gifts with the world. She placed a hand on Travis's shoulder. He flinched just barely. And some. She looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. Some you wish you never had to see every day because they just remind you of how hard you tried and how little it mattered. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It was cruel. It was calculated. It was classic Judith. She wanted to humiliate me, to put me in my place. The disappointing son, the failure, the audience member in the theater of Travis's life. I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest. It was the same heat I felt when I was 10 years old, watching Travis open presents while I sat in the corner. But this time I didn't swallow it. This time I used it. I smiled. A genuine, terrifying smile. I stepped forward, right into the center of the circle. That's beautifully put, Mother, I said, my voice projecting clearly without shouting. And you're right. Some children are burdens. But I have good news. I looked around the room, making eye contact with the senator, then the banker, then back to my mother. Your wish just came true. You won't have to see me. In fact, you won't be seeing much of anything around here anymore. What are you babbling about? She snapped, losing her composure. I'm moving to Monaco tomorrow, I said, checking my watch. But I didn't want to leave without giving you a gift. After all, you taught me everything I know about value. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded document. I didn't hand it to her. I just held it. I'll just wait for the music, I said. I wouldn't miss Travis's performance for the world. I'm dying to hear how he handles the arpeggios in the third movement. They're tricky, especially for someone with small hands. I walked past them, heading straight for the bar. I felt their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the tension radiating off Travis like heat waves. He knew. Deep down, in the pit of his stomach, he knew that the game was up. I ordered a sparkling water. I didn't need alcohol. I needed clarity. I turned around and leaned against the bar, watching the family that had raised me, and the family that had destroyed me. To understand why I'm standing here in a velvet tuxedo, about to ruin my mother's life, you have to understand the basement. You have to understand the silence. You have to understand the theft. It started 20 years ago, with an out-of-tune piano and a lie that cost me my soul. The basement of our house in Kansas City didn't smell like mold. It smelled like rust and old paper. It was my sanctuary. Upstairs was the kingdom of Travis. The living room was where his trophies were displayed on shelves that Dad dusted every Sunday. The kitchen was where Mom hung his report cards and newspaper clippings on the fridge, layering them so thick you couldn't see the white enamel anymore. I was the shadow. I was 2 years younger, scrawnier, and quiet. While Travis was being groomed to be the next great American talent, I was just Carson, the spare part. My parents had decided early on that Travis was a genius. He had perfect pitch, they said. He had the hands of a god. Mom would tell the neighbors. They bought him a baby grand piano and put it in the sunroom. They hired the best tutors. They forced him to practice 4 hours a day. The problem was Travis didn't love music. He loved the applause. He loved the attention. But he hated the work. He played technically, hitting the notes, but it was hollow. It was like listening to a robot read poetry. I, on the other hand, heard music in everything. I heard it in the rhythm of the washing machine, in the rain hitting the gutters, in the hum of the refrigerator. I found an old upright piano in the basement. It came with the house, left behind by previous owners who didn't want to haul it up the narrow stairs. It was missing a wheel and the middle C stuck if you hit it too soft. But to me it was beautiful. I taught myself. I couldn't read sheet music at first, so I played by ear. I would listen to Travis's lessons through the floorboards. When his tutor, Mr. Henderson, would yell, "No, Travis, feel the emotion," I would close my eyes and feel it. My fingers would dance over the chipped ivory keys of the basement piano, playing what Travis couldn't. One afternoon, when I was 12, I was down there, lost in something I was making up. It was a sad, rolling melody that felt like winter. I didn't hear the door open. "Carson." I froze. My hands hovered over the keys. I turned around to see Aunt Eileen standing at the bottom of the stairs. Aunt Eileen was Dad's sister, but she was nothing like him. She was loud, messy, and smelled like peppermint and cigarettes. She was a retired music teacher who had been pushed out of the family circle because she didn't have ambition. She walked over, her eyes wide. "What was that? What were you playing?" "Nothing," I mumbled, terrified Mom would hear. "Just noise." "That wasn't noise, honey," she whispered, sitting on the bench next to me. "That was a composition. Did you write that?" I nodded, looking at my sneakers. "Play it again." I did, and that was the beginning. For 2 years, Aunt Eileen was my secret. She came over on Tuesdays when Mom took Travis to his sports massage, because geniuses need massages, apparently. She taught me how to read music, how to structure a melody, how to write down the sounds in my head. "You have a gift, Carson," she told me one day, her hands shaking a little. "A real gift. Not like, well, not like what goes on upstairs. But secrets in a house like ours don't last forever." The turning point happened when Travis was 15. There was a statewide composition competition. The prize was a scholarship to a summer conservatory and, more importantly, a feature in the Kansas City Star. Mom was obsessed with it. She locked Travis in the sunroom for weeks. "Write," she'd scream. "Make it brilliant." But Travis couldn't write. He could play Mozart if you put the sheet music in front of him, but he couldn't create. He was a mimic, not an artist. 3 days before the deadline, the house was a war zone. Travis was throwing tantrums, smashing vases. Mom was crying, blaming Dad for Travis's block. I was in the kitchen, making a sandwich, trying to be invisible. Mom stormed in, her eyes red. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. She had heard rumors from Aunt Eileen. She had heard the faint music coming from the floorboards. "Carson," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "do you have anything written down from your little practice sessions?" I don't know," I stammered. "Bring them to me." "Mom, I don't." "Bring them to me." I went to the basement. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my blue notebook. It was just a spiral-bound school notebook, but it was filled with my soul. Scribbles, notes, melodies. I took it upstairs. Mom flipped through it. She didn't read music well, but she saw the complexity. She walked into the sunroom and slammed the notebook onto the piano in front of Travis. "Play this," she ordered. Travis looked at it. He frowned. Then he started to play. It was rough at first, but then the melody emerged. It was my winter sonatine. It was the song about being lonely in a house full of people. When he finished, silence filled the room. It's good, Travis said, sounding surprised. It's really good. Mom looked at me. There was no pride in her eyes. Only calculation. We're using this, she said. What? I stepped back. No, that's mine. Aunt Eileen said I should submit it to you. Mom laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. Carson, look at you. You're shy. You stutter when you get nervous. You have no stage presence. Who is going to listen to you? But Travis is a star. He just needs material. But it's mine, I yelled. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice at her. Dad walked in then. What's the yelling? Carson is going to help his brother, Mom said, staring me down. Travis is going to submit this piece for the competition. It stays in the family. We all win. No! I looked at Dad. Dad! Tell her, Aunt Eileen said. Dad looked at the notebook, then at Mom's furious face, then at Travis, who was already claiming the piano bench like a throne. Dad sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Carson, he said, his voice weary, don't be selfish. Your brother has a real shot at this. You can write more. It's just a song. Just a song. I felt tears pricking my eyes. It's not just a song. It's me. It's decided, Mom snapped. She grabbed the notebook. Travis, copy this out onto fresh staff paper. You'll get credit, Dad said quickly. We're setting up a college fund. A percentage of any prize money or future earnings from the music will go into it. You'll go to any school you want. MIT, Harvard, anywhere. You just stay in the background for now. Be the team player. I looked at Dad. I wanted him to save me. I wanted him to say, Judith, this is insane. He's a child. But he just tapped his pen on the desk, looking at the wall. I realized then that my father wasn't a bad man, but he was a weak one. And in my house, weakness was a death sentence. I picked up the pen. I signed my name, Carson Lane. I didn't know it then, but I had just signed a contract to become a slave in my own home. I had just agreed to become the ghost in the machine. For the next 4 years, that was my life. I went to school, I came home, and I went to the basement. I wrote sonatas, concertos, simple pop ballads. Mom would come down at 6 p.m., collect the pages, and take them upstairs. Travis became a local celebrity, then a state celebrity. He got into a prestigious conservatory on a full scholarship, based on a portfolio I wrote. He was playing concerts. He was getting interviewed on TV. The inspiration just comes to me, Travis would say on screen, flashing that charming smile. It's like a channel opens up to God. I watched from the living room couch, while Mom nodded approvingly. He's so articulate, she'd say. I was 16 when I realized the college fund was a lie. I found a bank statement in the trash. The Lane Family Trust was being drained as fast as money came in. Renovations on the house. A new BMW for Travis. Vacations to Italy for Mom and Dad. My name wasn't on any of the sub-accounts. I didn't confront them. I knew it wouldn't matter. I just went back to the basement and kept writing. But I stopped writing my best stuff. I gave them the flashy, shallow music they wanted. The stuff that sounded impressive but had no heart. I saved the real music for myself. I hid a second notebook, a black Moleskine, under a loose floorboard behind the furnace. That was where I put my pain. That was where I put my anger. And I started planning. By the time I was 18, the dynamic in the house had shifted from exploitation to straight-up imprisonment. Travis was struggling at the conservatory. Turns out, when you can't actually compose, it's hard to pass advanced composition theory. He was home for the summer, panicked. I need a symphony, he told Mom over breakfast. Professor Girelli says if I don't produce a major work by the fall, I'm on academic probation. They might cut my scholarship. Mom turned her laser gaze on me. I was buttering toast, trying to focus on the physics textbook I had open. Carson, she said. No, I said, not looking up. Excuse me? I said no. I have my own finals. I'm graduating high school next week. Remember? Your high school finals don't matter. Mom said, snatching my toast away. Travis's career is at stake. This is the big leagues. We need something huge. For movements. Orchestral. I can't write a symphony in a month, I said. And I won't. I'm done. You're done when I say you're done. Mom slammed her hand on the table. Do you think you live here for free? Do you think that food appears by magic? I'm leaving for college in August, I said quietly. I applied to Juilliard and Curtis, and I got in. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Even Travis stopped chewing. You applied, Mom whispered. How? The application fees. Aunt Eileen paid them, I said. And I used my own portfolio, the black notebook, the one you didn't steal. Mom's face went a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple and gray. She stood up, walked over to the counter where the mail pile sat, and started rifling through it. I was wondering what this was, she muttered, pulling out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It had been opened. That's mine, I said, standing up. Juilliard, she read. Full scholarship. Give it to me. She looked at me, then at the envelope. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she tore it in half. Then in quarters. No! I lunged for her, but Dad stepped in between us. Carson, settle down, Dad yelled, pushing me back. She tore up my acceptance letter. I screamed. That's my life. You are not going to Juilliard, Mom said, dropping the confetti of my future into the trash compactor. She pressed the button. The machine whirred and crunched. We cannot afford to send you to New York, and we certainly cannot afford to lose the person who makes Travis viable. I have a scholarship. Scholarships don't cover living expenses. They don't cover flights. Mom yelled back. And who is going to pay the mortgage when Travis loses his sponsorship because he flunked out? You? With your little piano songs. You spent the money, I shouted. You spent my college fund on his car. That car is for his image. Travis piped up, his mouth full of eggs. I need to look the part. I looked at them, the three of them, a trinity of parasites. I'm not writing the symphony, I said. My voice was cold now. I'm leaving. Today. If you walk out that door, Dad said, his voice trembling, don't expect a dime. Don't expect to come back. That's the plan, I said. I went to my room to pack. But when I got there, the door was locked from the outside. I jiggled the handle. Open the door. You can come out when you have the first movement written. Mom yelled from the hallway. There's a keyboard in there. And paper. Get to work. Couldn't believe it. They had actually locked me in. I kicked the door until my foot bruised. I screamed until my throat was raw. Nobody came. For 3 days I was a prisoner. Mom slid trays of food under the door like I was an animal. I didn't touch the keyboard. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a hatred so pure it almost felt like peace. On the 4th night, a thunderstorm rolled in. The power flickered and went out. The electronic lock on my door was battery operated. Of course it was. Mom wasn't an architect. But the window. I went to the window. We were on the 2nd floor. There was a trellis with ivy growing up the side of the house. It was slippery with rain, but it was my only shot. I grabbed my backpack. I had the black notebook tucked inside my shirt, against my skin. I didn't take clothes. I didn't take my toothbrush. I just took the music. I climbed out into the rain. The wind whipped my face. I slipped once, scraping my arm raw against the brick, but I caught myself on a thick vine. I scrambled down, landing in the muddy flower bed Mom's prize hydrangeas. I trampled them on purpose. I ran. I ran through the neighborhood, the rain soaking me to the bone. I didn't go to the bus station. They would look for me there. I went to Aunt Eileen's. She lived in a small duplex on the other side of town. I pounded on her door at 2 a.m. She opened it, wearing a fuzzy pink robe, a cigarette dangling from her lip. Carson. She pulled me inside. My God, you're freezing. What happened? I told her everything. The letter, the lock, the demand for the symphony. Aline didn't say a word. She just went to her kitchen, poured me a mug of hot cocoa, and then went to her bedroom. I heard her rummaging around. She came back holding a small velvet box and a stack of cash. "This is $5,000, she said, putting the cash on the table. "It was my emergency fund. And this." She opened the box. It was a diamond ring. Vintage. Beautiful. "This was your grandmother's. It's the only thing of value I have left." "Aunt Eileen, I can't." "You can and you will," she said, her voice fierce. "You take this. You sell it. You get as far away from those vampires as you can. Do not go to New York. They'll look for you at Juilliard. Go further." "Where?" "Europe," she said. "Go to Paris. Go to Vienna. Go where music is in the stones. Reinvent yourself. Change your name. Become the artist you are, not the shadow they made you." I hugged her. She smelled of smoke and salvation. "What about you?" I asked. "Mom will know you helped me. She'll cut you off." "Let her." Eileen smiled sadly. "I'm tired of their parties anyway." I left the next morning on a Greyhound bus to Chicago, and from there, I bought a one-way ticket to Paris. I was 18. I had a backpack, a notebook, and a stolen diamond ring. I was terrified, but as the plane lifted off, breaking through the storm clouds into the sunlight above, I heard a melody in my head. It was soaring. It was free. I opened my notebook and started to write. I didn't write a symphony for Travis. I wrote the soundtrack to my own escape. Paris in the winter is not romantic when you're broke. It's gray, wet, and bites right through your coat. I lived in a closet-sized apartment in the 18th arrondissement. The walls were paper-thin, and my neighbor was an old man who cooked cabbage soup every night. The smell seeped into my clothes, into my hair. I sold the ring for way less than it was worth, but it was enough to buy a cheap electric piano and pay rent for 6 months. I changed my name. I dropped Lane. I dropped Carson. I became Vaughn. Just Vaughn. It sounded strong. It sounded singular. I got a job washing dishes at a bistro near Montmartre. My hands, which were meant for playing Rachmaninoff, were red and chapped from hot water and detergent. But at night I played. I found a jazz bar called Le Caveau. It was dark, smoky, and smelled of spilled wine. The owner, a grumpy man named Henri, let me play the piano in the back during the slow hours in exchange for free beer and leftovers. I didn't play jazz. I played my own style, a fusion of classical structure with modern, melancholic emotion. It was the music of the lost. One rainy Tuesday, the bar was empty except for a woman sitting in the corner. She was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, even though it was dark inside. She had a bottle of expensive red wine in front of her. I was playing the Winter Sonatine, the real version, not the butcher job Travis had played. I was pouring my guts into the keys. When I finished, I heard a slow clapping. The woman stood up and walked over to the piano. She took off her sunglasses. I recognized her immediately. It was Isabella Rossi. The Isabella Rossi, the opera diva who had famously walked off stage at La Scala 2 years ago and vanished. "Who wrote that?" she asked. Her voice was husky, rich. "I did," I said. "You're a liar," she said. "You're a dishwasher. I saw you in the alley on my smoke break." "I am a dishwasher," I said, holding up my raw hands. "But I wrote the music." She stared at me for a long time. "Play it again." Played it. When I looked up, she was crying, silent tears running down her cheeks. "I have been looking for a sound," she whispered. "For 2 years, I have been looking for a sound that matches the hole in my chest. This is it." She hired me on the spot, not as a pianist, as a composer. We worked out of her apartment on the Isle St. Louis. It was huge, filled with light and velvet furniture. For 6 months, we just wrote. I pulled everything out of the black notebook. Every hurt, every rejection, every moment of silence from my father. I turned it all into music for her voice. When Isabella released her comeback album, Shadows of Light, it didn't just top the charts. It exploded. It won a Grammy. It won awards in countries I couldn't even spell. The critics went wild. "Who is the composer?" they asked. "Who is the mysterious Vaughn?" Isabella kept my secret. "He is a ghost," she told the press. "He speaks only through the music." That anonymity gave me power. I wasn't Carson Lane, the failure. I was Vaughn, the enigma. Royalty checks started coming in. Big ones, then huge ones. Other artists wanted to work with me. Film directors wanted scores. I said no to almost everyone. I kept the supply low and the demand high. I moved out of the closet apartment. I bought a loft, then a villa in Tuscany. Then I started my own production company, Eileen Holdings. But I never stopped watching. I had a private investigator in Kansas City. Every month I got a dossier on the Lane family. It was a slow-motion car crash. Without me to write the music, Travis had floundered. He released one album of experimental noise that was panned by critics. To keep up appearances, Mom had burned through Dad's retirement savings. They mortgaged the house. Then they took out a second mortgage. Travis had developed a gambling problem. He owed money to some bad people in St. Louis. And then I saw the news. A press release. Travis Lane to premiere new symphony at Charity Gala. I zoomed in on the photo. Travis looked desperate. The article said this was his comeback. I called my investigator. "Find out what he's playing." 2 days later, I got an audio file. It was a recording from a rehearsal. Travis was playing a piece called Spring Rebirth. I listened to the first 10 bars and laughed out loud in my empty villa. It wasn't new. It was an exercise I had written when I was 12. It was in the blue notebook, the one Mom had stolen years ago. It wasn't even a full song. It was a fragment, a practice scale I had turned into a melody. He was going to try to stretch a 3-minute practice etude into a symphony. He was going to fail. But I wasn't going to let him just fail. I was going to destroy him. I picked up the phone and called my banker in Zurich. "Marcus," I said, "I need you to buy something for me." "What are we buying, Vaughn?" "Another vineyard." "No," I said, looking at the photo of my childhood home. "I want to buy a debt, a specific portfolio of distressed mortgages in Kansas City. And I want to buy a car, a Rolls-Royce." "You're going to America?" Marcus asked. "Yes," I said. "I have a birthday party to attend." The acquisition of my parents' debt was surprisingly easy. They were so leveraged that the local bank was happy to offload the toxic asset to an anonymous holding company. For the price of a mid-range sports car, I essentially owned the roof over their heads. But I didn't stop there. I bought the loan on Travis's BMW. I bought the promissory notes he had signed with the loan sharks in St. Louis. That was a stickier negotiation, involving Marcus and some very large security guards, but cash talks. By the time I landed in Kansas City, I owned them. Every fork they ate with, every pillow they slept on, technically belonged to me. I spent the day before the party in a hotel suite at the Ritz-Carlton preparing. I wasn't just bringing financial ruin. I was bringing legal ruin. Marcus flew in from New York with a briefcase full of documents. Copyright registrations. Original timestamps of my compositions. Affidavits from Aunt Eileen. "You know," Marcus said, sipping an espresso while reviewing the files, "you could just sue them. We could settle this in court. You don't have to go there." "Court is boring," I said, adjusting my tie in the mirror. "Court is private. They humiliated me in public, Marcus. For years. They made me feel small in front of everyone. I want them to feel small." "It's theatrical," Marcus warned. "I'm a composer," I shrugged. "I like drama." I drove the Rolls-Royce to Aunt Eileen's new place first. I had bought her a condo in a gated community 2 years ago, anonymously at first, then I told her. She was the only one who knew I was Vaughn. She was waiting for me on the porch. She looked older, frilier, but her eyes were still sharp. "You look expensive," she said, hugging me. I smelled the peppermint, but the cigarette smell was gone. She had quit. "You look beautiful, Aunt Eileen. Are you sure you want to do this, Carson?" she asked, holding my face. "Revenge is a heavy stone to carry." It's not just revenge, I said. It's a correction. They're living a lie. I'm just bringing the truth. Just remember, she said softly, when you walk out of there tonight, you leave it all behind. You don't look back. Promise me. I promise. I drove to the house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawns of the wealthy. Felt surreal to be back. The streets were the same, but the scale was different. The houses that used to look like castles now looked like desperate attempts to prove relevance. I arrived at the party. I did the hook. I dropped the Monaco line. I watched them squirm. Now, I was standing at the bar, sipping my sparkling water, watching the clock. It was 8 p.m. Performance time. Mom was fluttering around Travis, fixing his tie, whispering frantically in his ear. Dad was pacing. The guests were being ushered into the great room, the renovated living room that had been expanded to hold a concert seating arrangement. A black Steinway piano sat on a raised platform. I walked in with the crowd, taking a seat in the back row. I wanted a wide view. Travis took the stage. The applause was polite, expectant. He sat down at the bench. He adjusted the height. He wiped his hands on his pants. "Thank you all for coming," Travis said into the microphone. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. This piece is called Spring Rebirth. It's about finding hope after a long winter. He looked at Mom. She gave him a thumbs up. He placed his hands on the keys. He started to play. It was the Winter Sonatine Fragments. The first few bars were okay. Simple, melancholic. But then he hit the transition, the part where the melody is supposed to shift into a complex, rapid-fire arpeggio representing the storm breaking. I knew that transition. I wrote it to test my own dexterity. It required a crosshand technique that Travis had never mastered. He hesitated. He missed a note, then another. The rhythm stumbled. It sounded like a drunk person trying to walk upstairs. The room grew uncomfortable. People shifted in their seats. Travis stopped. "Sorry," he muttered. "Nerves. Let me start that section again." He started again. Clunk. Mississippi Discord. It was painful. It wasn't just bad. It was exposing. It revealed that he didn't understand the music he was playing. He was typing, not speaking. Mom was pale. She stood up halfway. "It's the humidity," she announced to the room, her voice shrill. "The keys are sticking." "The keys aren't sticking," I said. My voice carried through the silent room. I stood up. "The keys are fine," I said, walking down the center aisle. "The problem is the player." "Sit down, Carson," Dad yelled. "Don't you dare ruin this." "I'm not ruining it," I said, reaching the stage. "I'm saving it." "He's struggling because the piece isn't finished." "Is it, Travis? You only have the first page." Travis looked at me with terror in his eyes. I. "Scoot over," I said. "What?" "Get up." Travis looked at Mom. She was frozen. I didn't wait. I grabbed Travis by the shoulder of his expensive suit and physically pulled him off the bench. He was so shocked he didn't resist. He stumbled back, nearly knocking over the microphone stand. I sat down. The bench was still warm from his panic. I didn't need sheet music. This song was etched into my DNA. "This is how it's supposed to sound," I whispered. I closed my eyes, and I played. My hands hit the keys and the world fell away. I didn't start with the gentle opening Travis had used. I started with the storm. I slammed into the bass notes, a dark, thunderous chord that made the guests jump. Then, my right hand began the melody. Fast, aggressive, intricate. It wasn't Spring Rebirth. It was the escape. I played the anger of the locked room. I played the rain on the trellis. I played the cold nights in Paris. I played the loneliness of the basement. The Steinway responded like a living thing. I pushed the tempo, faster and faster, my fingers blurring. It was a rhapsody of rage and liberation. I opened my eyes briefly. I saw the faces in the front row. The senator's mouth was open. The banker was leaning forward, mesmerizing. I looked at Travis. He was standing by the curtains, looking small, defeated. He recognized the skill. He knew in that moment that he had never been a musician. He was just a guy who took lessons. I looked at Mom. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the guests, gauging their reaction. She was terrified, not of my talent, but of her loss of control. I transitioned into the final movement, a soft, haunting melody that echoed the winter sonatine, but resolved into a major key. It was the sound of forgiveness? No, it was the sound of indifference. It was the sound of moving on. I hit the final chord. It hung in the air, vibrating against the crystal chandeliers. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence. Then the senator stood up. He started clapping. Then the banker. Then the whole room. It was a standing ovation. A real one. Not the polite golf claps Travis got. This was the roar of people who had just witnessed something impossible. I stood up. I didn't bow. I just stood there, breathing hard, feeling the adrenaline crash through my veins. Mom rushed the stage. She grabbed the microphone. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. She saw the applause and her instinct to claim credit kicked in. "My son!" she yelled over the clapping. "My son! I told you. Talent runs in this family. We kept this a surprise. A duet." She tried to put her arm around me. I stepped away. I took the microphone from her hand. "No," I said into the mic. The feedback squealed. The room went quiet again. "It's not a duet," I said. "And it's not a family talent. Travis didn't write this music. He didn't write the music that got him into the conservatory. He didn't write the music that won the state championship." "Carson, stop," Dad hissed from the side of the stage. "We'll talk about this later." "I wrote it," I continued, ignoring him. "All of it, since I was 12. In the basement, while you were upstairs counting his trophies." "He's lying," Mom shrieked. "He's jealous. He's mentally unstable." "Am I?" I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the blue notebook. It was tattered, taped together, the cover faded. "This is the original notebook," I said, holding it up. "My handwriting. Dated 2004. Would anyone like to see it?" I tossed the notebook into the front row. The senator caught it. He opened it. He looked at the page, then at Travis. "But that's not the only thing," I said. "You know me as Carson. But in the industry, I go by a different name." I paused. I let the silence stretch. "I am Vaughn." A gasp went through the room. A woman in the back dropped her glass. It shattered. "Vaughn?" someone whispered. "The Vaughn? Who writes for Isabella Rossi?" "Yes," I said. "And since I am Vaughn, my hourly rate is quite high. You've been getting a discount for 20 years. I signaled to the back of the room. Marcus, my lawyer, walked in. He was flanked by 2 process servers. "This is my attorney," I said. "He has cease and desist orders for Travis Lane for performing copyrighted material without a license. He also has a lawsuit for theft of intellectual property and unpaid royalties for the last decade. We estimate the damages at around $4 million. Travis crumpled. He actually sank to his knees on the stage floor, putting his head in his hands. "But money is boring," I said, turning to Mom. "Let's talk about real estate." Mom was shaking. "What are you doing, Carson? Why are you doing this?" "Because you said you wished you didn't have to see me," I said. "And I want to make sure you get your wish. I bought your mortgage, Mother. I bought the bank note last week. You haven't made a payment in 4 months. You're in default." "No," she whispered. "Harold said he handled it." "Harold borrowed money from Travis's loan sharks to pay the interest," I said. "I bought that debt too." I stepped closer to her. The guests were silent, watching the execution. "I am foreclosing on this property," I said. "Effective immediately. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Everything inside the house, the furniture, the piano, the art, is now collateral against the debt." "You can't do this," Mom screamed. She lunged at me, clawing at my face. "I'm your mother. I gave you life." Dad grabbed her, holding her back. She was sobbing now, ugly, heaving sobs. "You gave me life," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. "And then you tried to turn me into a battery for your golden robot. You drained me, but I recharged." I looked at the crowd. "The party is over," I announced. "Please drive safely." I walked off the stage. I walked past Travis, who was weeping on the floor. I didn't look down. I walked past Dad, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I walked down the center aisle, the guests parting like the Red Sea. They looked at me with a mix of fear and awe. I wasn't the invisible son anymore. I was the monster in the tuxedo, and I was magnificent. The walk to the car was the longest walk of my life. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I heard footsteps running behind me on the gravel. "Carson, wait, son, please." It was Dad. I stopped near the Rolls-Royce. I turned around. Dad was out of breath. He looked old, suddenly incredibly old. "You can't leave them like this," he wheezed. "Travis, he's suicidal. Your mother is having a breakdown. Where will we go?" "I don't know, Dad," I said. "Maybe you can stay with Aunt Eileen." "Oh wait, Mom hasn't spoken to her in 10 years because she bought me a piano lesson. So that's probably out." "I'm sorry," Dad said. Tears were streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, Carson. I should have stopped her. I was weak." "Yes," I said. "You were. And silence is a choice, Dad. You chose her every single day. You watched me drown, and you just turned up the TV." "I love you," he sobbed. "No, you don't," I said simply. "You love the idea of a happy family, but you don't love the people in it. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let me sign that contract at 14. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let her tear up my Juilliard letter." I opened the car door. "Here," I said, reaching into the glove box. I pulled out a check. I had written it earlier. It was for $50,000. "What is this?" "It's a severance package," I said. "It's enough for a rental apartment and some food. Don't spend it on Travis's gambling debts or you'll starve." "I'm serious, Dad. This is the last penny you will ever see from me." He took the check, his hands shaking. "Why?" he asked. "Why give us anything?" "Because I'm not you," I said. I got in the car. I started the engine. The V12 purred to life. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the police lights flashing down the street. Marcus had called them to enforce the eviction notice and ensure the peace. I saw blue and red lights reflecting off the white pillars of the house. I saw the guests streaming out, getting into their cars, fleeing the scandal. I watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror. The house where I learned to walk, learned to hide, and learned to hate. It was just a building now. A pile of bricks and wood owned by a shell company in the Caymans. I drove to the airport. My private jet was waiting. I sat in the leather seat, staring out the window as we took off. I watched Kansas City shrink into a grid of lights below me. Somewhere down there, my mother was screaming. Somewhere down there, my brother was realizing he was nobody. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was lightness. The heavy stone Aunt Eileen talked about? I had dropped it. I pulled out my phone. I had one text message. It was from Aunt Eileen. "Did you do it?" I typed back. "It's done." I played the song. She replied, "Good. Now come home. Italy is waiting." I turned off my phone. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 20 years, the music in my head was quiet. It was a peaceful silence. 3 years later, the sun over Lake Como is different than the sun in Kansas. It's softer. It doesn't judge. I was sitting on the terrace of my villa, drinking an espresso. The air smelled of jasmine and lemon. Inside the house, I could hear a piano. It wasn't me playing. It was Leo, a 10-year-old boy from the local village. He was the son of a baker. His parents couldn't afford lessons, so I taught him. He was playing a simple scale, but he was struggling with the timing. "Slow down, Leo," I called out in Italian. "Feel the space between the notes. The silence is just as important as the sound." He stopped. "Like this, maestro?" He played it again. slower, with feeling. Perfect, I smiled. Aunt Eileen walked onto the terrace. She was wearing a large sun hat and holding a gardening trowel. She lived in the guest cottage on the property. We had breakfast together every morning. The postman came, she said, dropping a letter on the table. It had a U.S. stamp. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. It was shaky, jagged. It was Travis. I looked at it. Are you going to open it? Eileen asked. I thought about it. I thought about the man on the floor of the stage. I thought about the ghost I used to be. No, I said. I picked up the lighter I kept on the table for the citronella candles. I flicked it on. I held the corner of the envelope to the flame. We watched it burn. The paper curled, turning black, the ashes floating away on the breeze over the lake. What do you think it said? Eileen asked. Probably asking for money, I said. Or blaming me. It doesn't matter. That story is finished. So what's the next story? She asked. I looked at Leo inside, hunched over the keys, his face scrunching up in concentration. I looked at Eileen, the woman who saved my life with a diamond ring. I looked at the lake, blue and endless. The next story is about building, I said. Not destroying. I had started the Carson Lane Foundation last year. We found kids like me, kids with talent but no resources, kids with families who didn't understand them, and we gave them a chance. We gave them pianos. We gave them violins. We gave them a voice. I walked inside and sat next to Leo on the bench. Move over, I said. Let's play a duet. He grinned. Which one? Let's make one up, I said. You start. I'll follow. He hit a note. I harmonized. We played together, two different hands, two different generations, making something new. I realized then that Mom was wrong. She said some children are burdens. But she didn't understand the basic law of physics or music. Energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. I took the pain she gave me and turned it into a symphony. I took the rejection and turned it into an empire. And now, I was taking the silence and filling it with the laughter of a kid who just loved to play. I am Carson Lane. I am Vaughn. And I am finally, truly free. Thank you so much for being patient and walking this path with me. From the basement to the stage. You are amazing. Please, help me out by hitting the like button and commenting bravo below if you think talent should always win over greed. This helps more people find this story, and it tells me that my journey actually means something to you. Your support is the biggest applause I could ever ask for. See you in the next story.